Hello. All right, I have a couple of papers. Welcome back, Alexander and Lauren. And I believe you have a paper for me, which I will wander and collect.
That's right. Grab this. We'll just leave it up to the judge.
The power. Oh, the power in my hands. Thank you. I will look for them. You can email it. Ashley, is that for me? Awesome. So a couple, I'm just going to go ahead. I already turned us on, so we're just rolling. Oh, no, you could be a star. Technically, you're not supposed to have like underage people on YouTube. Like you have to get, anyway, so I try not to turn the camera. So I may not be here on our final week before Christmas. My son hopefully will graduate from Ranger School. I hope. If he does, so he gets out of mountain phase again tomorrow night. He's there. It's getting down in the 20s overnight. He has a 75-pound pack. They're out for 5 nights. They sleep outside. It's raining now. And yeah, so if he passes that, then this weekend he'll go to Florida for 3 weeks in the swamp. And then he will be a Ranger qualified soldier. And if he is, it's a big deal. And I'm going to go to Florida, and it's December 9th, December 8th and 9th are the. So I may see you one time after Thanksgiving, but not the second time. However, some of you, okay, so some of you are new to me and you don't know this. I teach this class other days, but my classes go 32 weeks, and the School Aid group just goes 30 weeks. So I have 2 extra weeks. And last May, I invited people if they wanted to come to my house and do a final class. And so I'm thinking about just asking if anybody wants to come the week of December 14th. You could just come to my house and like eat cookies and have Christmas cookies and have a class if you wanted. It's not required. Okay, I will have a video for you to watch, which I would love for you to watch. But I may just see you on the week after Thanksgiving, and then I may not see you again until after Christmas if I'm in Georgia. But I've told your parents I'm going to work it out. If maybe the week I'm gone, they can show the video here on the screen, and you could just sit in here and watch it during the time, and you wouldn't have to use your own time later to watch it, or you may just end up having to have a study hall of some sort. But thank you for your patience, but I don't want to miss my son's thing. So I will let you know. I will see you the week after Thanksgiving, and then I'll let you know, will I be here the next, I may not know for sure, because honestly, I won't know if he passed swamp till right before we leave for Georgia. But there's a high possibility. I'm hoping he'll make it through. But I will definitely see you after Thanksgiving, so we don't meet next week. You all know this, I think. I'm giving you some work to do, but it is much less than I've been giving you, and you have 2 weeks to do it. So I'm asking you to do something, but I'm not asking you to work your brains out over Thanksgiving, because I'm kind. Sometimes. And last week, I don't think, did I read the excerpt from Josephus? to you guys? I don't think I did. I think there's only one class I remember to do this with last week, and it wasn't you. So just to backtrack last week's class, we were talking about Pompey the Great. And he went at one point to the east, and he was fighting this Mithridates that everybody apparently fights, because he's just immortal, apparently. Everybody fights Mithridates. Actually, I think there's more than one guy named Mithridates. And while Pompey was in the east, there was just a little quick blurb in Plutarch that he went through Syria and conquered Judea. And that was it. And I just felt like we ought to stop and talk about that just a moment, because, we're getting close. Advent season is approaching, and so we're thinking about Christmassy things. And obviously, when you think of the nativity story, an important part of the fact is the Romans are in charge. And you might want to know, well, when did the Romans get to be in charge? How did that happen? And Josephus tells us, yes. Oh, I did read that? Oh, yeah, okay, good. Okay, so I did read that. All right, it was you guys who got it, because everybody else missed out on it. Yes, Carson.
Is the fact that we start learning about the Christian church after.
That is awesome, and that would be brilliant if some brilliant teacher planned it that way, wouldn't it? It'd be awesome. Yes, we will be starting to talk about the Christian church. Although over Christmas, I think we're talking about like Caligula and some of the crazy emperors. Okay, what I would like to do, first of all, let's talk about writing. I am not asking you to write anything over Thanksgiving break. Okay?
Really? Dang. Wow. Wait, you're not Mrs. Ferguson. Wait, where is she at?
Wow. Wow. Okay, but I'm going to tell you what we're going to write when we come back. And if you want to start jotting down ideas and sort of outlining your ideas, it will make your life much easier when we come back. So, and honestly, though, see, I'm assuming my son is going to graduate, because I have to assume something. Do you know what I mean? It's safe to assume that. If I end up here and he doesn't graduate, no harm done. But I'm going to assign a paper the week after Thanksgiving that would be due the next week. But you see, if I'm not here to collect it, you could just email it to me. You know what I mean? It gives you a little leeway. But it's a completely writable paper in 1 week. But you have 2 weeks. You might as well jot down notes to yourself and work on it and just make your life easier later. And so here's what I'd like you to do. Please turn in your reading guide to page 41. 41. I'm going to ask you to write a comparison. So the paper I just collected was either an encomium or an invective or a vituperation about one person. A comparison is just what it sounds like, a comparison of 2 people in all of those areas. You compare their upbringing. You compare their heritage. You compare their deeds. You can compare 2 people who are equally good. You can compare 2 people who are equally bad. You can compare one person who is good and one person who is not so good, and highlight the good person, hopefully, and not the bad person. So on page 41, you see the outline. A comparison has a prologue. Introduce the topic, state your opinion, description of the heritage of each of them, description of the upbringing of each of them, description of the deeds of each of them, and a call to imitate one or both of them, or maybe neither of them, as the case may be. When we come back together, I'm going to take a moment to read through the example. But this example works just like the one I just read to you before. You can look at the outline and then read the section, and you see how he did it. In this case, he's comparing Achilles and Hector, who in his mind are equally good. They're both awesome fighters standing for their respective people. And he doesn't really call one of them out as being bad or good. So this is an example of, what if you're praising 2 pretty good people? or two pretty bad people, as the case may be. But obviously, if you chose one who's better than the other, then in each of your paragraphs where you're comparing, it's like, whereas this one, killed half the population of Rome and snatched power. That one forgave his enemies and didn't, institute a bloodbath. And I want you to choose one of these two of the six men that we're reading the lives of. Marius, Sulla, Crassus, Pompey, Cicero, Caesar. Pick two. Yes.
Reading through this,
Thank you.
I find that
Aphthonius, yes.
Aphthonius also compared their deaths, which I've never thought about doing before.
That's a very good point. Comparing their deaths, did they die well, as they say? Did they die poorly? Did they die justly, unjustly? Yes, Ethan.
I've noticed it's so hard to write an encomium or a method, or probably do a comparison in strictly the third person. Do you want it strictly?
No, you can, if you want to say I. Because you know what? These are your observations, and they're freely your opinion and your observations. When we're trying to persuade someone of something, it's just less persuasive, I think. Like, well, who are you? But if you say, this is true, you're like, ooh, this is true. Maybe I better listen, and I'm persuaded. So that's why. But no, in this case, that's a very good question, Ethan. No, but I'm not asking you to write this. In fact, maybe you don't want to write it because we're going to add metaphor to our list of figures of speech. But if you just picked two of them, you're going to read Julius Caesar over break. Plutarch's Julius Caesar. It's about the same length as the Pompey.
That was 63 pages.
I know, but you have 2 weeks. 30 pages a week. Honestly, if you wanted to, you could just fix some snacks and sit down for 3 hours or something like that and just blow the whole thing away. You could, in one sitting. You could. So you can use, if you want to use Caesar as one of your two, you can just jot down things while you read Julius Caesar. But if you came 2 weeks from now and you say, okay, I've chosen my two guys and I've jotted down observations for both of them, and Simeon, here's another niceness of Mrs. Ferguson. If you want to reuse the one you just did the encomium or vituperation on, if you want to use the same information, you go for it. I don't care. You don't have to pick two new ones. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You already wrote down all the stuff about this guy and wrote a paper. Go with it. Just compare him to someone else, and that makes your life easier. But if you just jot down, just like you did before we wrote the encomium, just observations. Like, okay, I think I'm going to pick these two guys and decide if they're both villains, both heroes, or one of each. And just jot down observations that you're going to talk about, okay? Then when we come back after Thanksgiving, we'll go over the example, all right? And if you don't do anything over Thanksgiving, it won't kill you. But if you have some notes written down, it'll make life easier for you. Okay, so nothing due. Nothing due when I see you in 2 weeks. And just all I want you to do is read the life of Caesar. That's it. And so today I want to talk about Cicero and this crazy plot where we're going to murder half the Senate and burn down Rome. What? So have any of you ever used Wheelock's Latin? Do you know there's a tech? Okay. Isn't there tons of, and Cicero denounces Catiline in the Senate, and you go through really like, what? This guy just keeps talking and talking. This is it. Now, all of those translations make total sense because we met the players today. What I want to do is I want to go through the life of Cicero on the questions on page 37, and then when we get to the Catiline conspiracy, we're going to pop out of Plutarch and then look at Sallust. And we're going to look at the conspiracy. Then we'll pop back into Cicero's life after the conspiracy was over. So starting out, so I'm going to look at Cicero. Oh, by the way, this is Cicero. I like him. I feel like he just looks like somebody's grandpa.
Yeah, he looks very real. Like very.
He doesn't look. Crassus, was it Crassus had the skinny, the jutting out chin, and it was just really intense. And then Pompey had the, yeah, it was sort of like a mythological person. Cicero just looks like a guy, just a guy. Cicero may have been the most eloquent, best with words, a man who ever lived. Some would argue. And of course, we are reading him in a translation when we read him. I've got some excerpts. And so, and honestly, I'll tell you the truth, my Latin is not really good enough that I appreciate Latin styles. Do you know what I mean? All I know is his sentences are very, very long. This is my summary of Cicero's Latin, but I'm not a Latin scholar to the point where I can say, oh, it's so eloquent Latin. But I do know that every New Year's there's a meme that circulates on Facebook that says, if you begin, what is it, on December 2nd to read a sentence of Cicero, you will hit the verb at midnight on New Year's Eve or something like that, insinuating that his sentences are really, really long, and they are. But a great speaker. Cicero sprang to fame, as it were, by taking on a very scary court case. Plutarch tells us this. At this time, Chrysogonus, Sulla's emancipated slave, having laid information about an estate belonging to one who was said to have been put to death by prescription, had bought it himself for 2,000 drachmas. Let me reiterate. Sulla has a freed slave named Chrysogonus. I'm on page 410, if your book looks like mine. Top 410. And somebody had died in the Sullan prescriptions, the lists of people who have to die. And this slave got wind of the fact that this guy died, and he set it up so he himself could buy this man's estate for a song on the cheap. And when Roscius, the son and heir of the dead, complained and demonstrated the estate to be worth 250 talents, Sulla took it angrily to have his actions questioned and preferred a process against Roscius for the murder of his father, Chrysogonus managing the evidence. Do you hear it? This is corruption to the extreme. So the dead guy's son said, how come he got to buy my dad's farm for a song? It's worth 20 times that, and I should have had first crack. And Sulla says, don't like you when you question what I do. So we're just going to set you up in court. We're going to make it sound like you murdered your father, which it said his father was on the prescription list. We don't know who actually murdered him, but it wasn't illegal to kill people on the list. And we're going to have the court case arranged by the former slave who bought the property. So picture this. No lawyer wants to touch this case to defend this guy's son. Because you're toast if you get on Sulla's bad side, right? You don't want to take the case. Cicero takes the case. It says, I've lost my page. There we go. None of the advocates durst assist him, but fearing the cruelty of Sulla, avoided the cause. The young man, being thus deserted, came for refuge to Cicero. Cicero's friends encouraged him, saying he was not likely ever to have a fairer and more honorable introduction to public life. He therefore undertook the defense, carried the cause, and got much renown for it. He got this guy's son off against all odds. He was a good talker. It says, but fearing Sulla, he traveled into Greece. He's not stupid. I mean, skedaddle and lay low for a while. But everybody's talking about Cicero. He spends time in Greece. He studies with philosophers. He polishes up his Greek to the point where, on his way home after Sulla died, he stopped at a collection, a meeting of philosophers and rhetors, and they said, hey, Cicero, give us a speech in Greek. Let's see how you're doing. See how your Greek is. And he does it and he nails it. It's perfect. And it says, after he finished, this is page 411, the first paragraph. After he finished, all his other hearers were astonished and contended who should praise him most. But Apollonius, who had shown no signs of excitement while he was hearing him, so also now when it was over, sat musing for some considerable time, without any remark. And when Cicero was discomposed at this, he said, you have my praise and admiration, Cicero, and Greece my pity and commiseration, since those arts and that eloquence, which are the only glories that remain to her, will now be transferred by you to Rome. Greece is nothing. All we have is our eloquence. And Cicero, you're about to take that too. So this is the impression he made in Greece. And he came back, ran for office, and got sent to Sicily. He was overseeing the Roman government in Sicily. And this is the first question I asked you. What do we learn about his character by the story of what happened when he came home? Do you remember the story of what happened when he came home? He came home, and the whole time he was in Sicily, he thought, I bet everybody's talking about me. I'm famous. I'm awesome. I'm such a good governor of Sicily. Everybody's just, they're going to roll out the red carpet when I come home. And he lands on the coast of Italy, and he runs into a friend. And he says, Cicero says, what have people been saying about me? And the guy says, well, I don't know. Where have you been? He didn't even know he was in Sicily. Oh, where have you been? What have you been doing? Cicero learned the hard way. He's not nearly as important as he thinks he is. Or he wasn't at that point. Later on, he is pretty doggone important. He thought he was awesome. And he came home and the guy said, yeah, didn't really know you were gone. Where you been? I know, it is kind of brutal.
He is kind of awesome. Like, you talk, you knows his Greek.
Oh, he is awesome. But it's not ever a bad thing to be reminded when we get a little full of ourselves, you know, that the world is not talking about us. It's just not. One of my favorite Aesop's fables, I think it's a bull and a gnat. It might be an elephant and a gnat, but we'll say the bull and the gnat. I like the sound of that. And basically the story is the gnat lands on this bull's back, and then the gnat wants to fly away, and he says to the bull, excuse me, I think I'm going to leave now. And the bull says, yeah, I didn't know when you landed, and I wouldn't know when you left. You are insignificant to me. You know, but the gnat thought he was really, oh, excuse me, I must be leaving now. Like, yeah, didn't notice. It says, nevertheless, he was always excessively pleased with his own praise and continued to the very last to be passionately fond of glory, which often interfered with the prosecution of his wisest resolutions. I got to be praised. I got to have glory. Sometimes I'm not sure what to do because I want to do the way that gets me the most praise and glory. So I change my mind. That can be a problem when we're driven by other people's praise. So he actually was in, after he was in Sicily, a former governor named Verres got brought up on charges. A bunch of people in Sicily came to Rome and they said, that Governor Verres is a rotter. He stole half our stuff. And Cicero prosecuted. This is just collected, like some letters and writings of Cicero. And we have his whole speech against Verres, against this governor in court. He says, but the most conspicuous and numerous instances and demonstrations of his criminality come from his governorship in Sicily. For 3 long years, he so thoroughly despoiled and pillaged the province that its restoration to its previous state is out of the question. A succession of honest governors over a period of many years could scarcely achieve even a partial rehabilitation. While Verres was governor, the Sicilians enjoyed the benefit neither of their own laws, nor of the Roman Senate's decrees, not even of the rights to which everyone in the world is entitled. All the property that anyone in Sicily still has for his own today is merely what happened to escape the attention of this avaricious lecher, or survived his glutted appetites. Well, he laid it on thick. The defendant has only 2 characteristics: his appalling record and his exceptional wealth. If, therefore, he is acquitted, the only reasons to which this decision can justifiably be ascribed are the worst. In other words, if you acquit him, I want to know how many people have you got bribed. Because the only reason to let this man go. Needless to say, he did not get let go. Verres got fined heavily for plundering Sicily. So Cicero was taking these high-profile cases. He really made a name for himself. And sometimes he took the cases that nobody else wanted, like the case of the first guy, because he was going to get on Sulla's bad side. Elected to consul, he was not a patrician. In fact, they joked sometimes that his dad was a fuller. You know, a fuller is somebody who beats clothes to clean them. You're probably familiar with this. There's no washing machine, so apparently if we beat clothes enough, they're clean. No, I have nothing to say about that. I don't know how clean your clothes are after you're beat. But a fuller is someone who beats your clothes for you. It seems like a lot of work. But his parents weren't wealthy, weren't notable, weren't patricians. And I asked you, why is eloquence important? And directed you to a paragraph that wasn't marked in your book. That's fine. That's fine. Did anybody think you know? It's on page 416 of this book. It persuades. And so if the thing you're trying to persuade someone of is good, that's a good thing. But if the thing you're trying to persuade them is bad, it's very dangerous, isn't it? It's dangerous in the wrong hands, in other words, almost as dangerous as a weapon. That might sound a little extreme, but you can incite people to very bad things if you are very good with words. Yes?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, eloquence is like really powerful, and like, eloquence is also like, if you're using your eloquent speech for good, like, you can save a lot of people, and you can give people I don't know, like inspiration or a love for eloquence of speech, and the good kind of eloquence of speech.
Here's the paragraph I was looking at. It's on page 416, bottom of the page. For Cicero, it may be said, was the one man above all others who made the Romans feel how great a charm eloquence lends to what is good, and how invincible justice is if it be well spoken. And skipping down a little bit, it says, in speaking, to free the right and useful measure from everything that may occasion offense. In other words, if I am trying to exhort you to do something good, and I am really, really poor at communicating it, I am going to, this is what he means by cause offense. It doesn't mean offend you, offend your emotions. It means be a stumbling block to you being persuaded. But if, on the other hand, this tool, like we said, is in the hands of somebody who's trying to persuade you, like Catiline, to do something nefarious, it is dangerous. So many of you have probably for years had some brush, at least, with the Institute for Excellence in Writing, with IEW stuff. And Andrew Pudawa, who does the videos and who is the starter of this, once in one of his teacher videos, he said something profound. He said, I'm going to have to paraphrase it, a good idea expressed poorly is less powerful than a bad idea expressed well. If you take a bad idea and you wrap it in good presentation, it persuades. But when you have the truth and you express it so very poorly, it might even turn people away from the truth. This is a heavy burden on us because as Christians, we have the truth. And I think we are responsible to, Paul says, always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you. In a persuasive way. I'm not a big apologetics person. Frankly, I don't know that people get argued into the kingdom of God. I think the power of our lives speaks volumes. But nevertheless, it is very important how we present the truth, whether we do it insultingly, whether we just stumble over ourselves and our words and don't make any sense, or whether we present it cogently and clearly, makes a difference. So I thought it was a very wise thing that Andrew Pudewa said, and that's why he's devoted his life to helping kids write better and communicate better, because if you have the truth, you have to be equipped to present it. And honestly, maybe you'll never write encomiums or vituperations again, but if you practiced a little bit presenting your ideas, then you've practiced a really important thing. My sermon is done. Sometimes I preach a little bit. So Cicero at this point is known for his eloquence. He's known for winning tough court cases, and he gets elected consul. And this is the moment that Catiline rears his ugly head. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the page and go to the Catiline questions now. And we're going to look in the Sallust book, and we're just going to look at the whole conspiracy. Then we'll come back to Plutarch. And Sallust, did you notice he goes on and on about prowess again? Prowess, virtue. And he, just like the Jugurthine War, starts his history with, I don't know, like a moral lesson, maybe? He says this at the beginning. I'm starting on page, whatever, the first page of the War with Catiline. All persons who are enthusiastic that they should transcend the other animals ought to strive with the utmost effort not to pass through a life of silence like cattle, which nature has fashioned to be prone and obedient to their stomachs. Our entire power resides in the mind as well as in the body. We use the mind to command and the body to serve. The former, meaning the mind, we share with the gods. The latter, the body, with the beasts. Therefore, it seems to me more correct to seek glory. Oh, this is my first question. Shoot. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and read it. It seems to me more correct to seek glory with our intellectual rather than with our physical resources. Sallust starts out by saying, look, people are this weird conglomeration, aren't they? The early Christians said the same. We share a rational soul, a rational being with the angels above us, and we share bodies with the animals below us. We are this hybrid weird thing in all of creation that are a little bit like the animals and a little bit like the angels. And Sallust is saying the same thing, and he's saying, which is better? Which is more honorable? Sallust, I think prowess of the mind. I think using your intellect, because that's what, he says, makes us like the gods. That's what we share with them. But we share, like, the guy who beat up the, punched the ox out. It was in the Aeneid, right? He punched the ox out with one blow. They were having the boxing match. Yeah, elephants can stomp you to death. Do you know what I mean? You can destroy, a bunch of animals can destroy you with their bodies, with their brute strength. But using your mind, that's in a different realm. That's like the realm of the gods for Sallust. And so, but he says, Let me find just a second. I want to skip up. Then I'll go back. Oh, please, where is it? Hang on. This is what happens when I try to find things out of order. Oh, here we go. On page 5. Lucius Catilina, born of a noble line, had great strength of both mind and body, but a wicked and crooked disposition. Neither one does you any good in a wicked and crooked disposition. He has prowess. He knows how to use his mind. He knows how to use his body. But he doesn't use either one well, according to Sallust. And so he goes on, Sallust goes on to say, how did this happen? I want you to picture, just stop for a minute and picture Livy. Not Livy the person, but the book. And all the things we read about. The time of Camillus and Coriolanus, and the geese are squawking on the Capitol, and the Horatii and the Curiatii are going out to fight. Can you picture in the middle of any of those stories a story in which a group of guys decides they're going to murder the Senate and burn down Rome? That just seems very out of place to me with those other stories. They argued, they didn't always get along, but none of them said, I'm going to murder you all and burn down Rome. That's another level. And Sallust says, how did we get from there to here? What happened to those people to have people arise that want to do such a thing? And Sallust says on page 6, the moral, he was incited by the community's corrupt morals. He says, just think how great Rome was when they bequeathed it and how it changed gradually from the finest and best and became the worst and most outrageous. On page 7, kind of in the middle there, he says, it is incredible to recall how much the community grew in a short time after its acquisition of freedom, after they got rid of the kings. So great was the desire for glory which has risen. But it's a good sort of glory. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to go out on the battlefield and I'm going to show my commander what I've got, and we're going to take out the Veites, Valerians, whoever we're fighting at the time, because I want to be awesome on the battlefield. And I want to do it for the glory of Rome. And we might, as Christians, like, kind of puffed up with yourself. But we can all sort of agree that's not a wholly bad thing to fight on behalf of one's fatherland, for the glory of it. But somehow it changed. Yes.
Sallust doesn't understand the fact that all people are evil, but some people are tools by the devil to influence grave evils.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, if these historians and philosophers were Christians, we would have so much wisdom pouring out into the ancient world. It'd be kind of crazy to see that. But.
Well, hold on to that thought, Ethan, because we're going to find out when we start reading some of the church fathers next spring that some of these men were very well educated. They had read all of these books. They knew all of this. And they did, understand that there was much wisdom to be had. And under your definition, too, I'm pretty sure Sallust would classify Catiline as tool of the devil. He would have been the, not just kind of bad, but thoroughly bad. So if Rome was so great, this was the next question I asked you. Why does Sallust think the guys in Athens get so much press, but the guys in early Rome don't? What does Athens have that Rome doesn't have? What is it, Hannah? Good writers. Indeed. He says, because a crop of greatly talented writers was produced there. The Athenians are celebrated across the globe. But such a possibility was never open to the Roman people because all their cleverest men were the most enterprising in action. No one exercised his intellectual talent without his body. The best men preferred to do rather than to speak. We were men of action. And we poured all our energy into action, and we didn't have great historians and playwrights back in the day, back before Livy. Once upon a time, it says they easily tolerated hard work, danger, and uncertain and rough conditions. But the desire for money, first of all, and then for empire, grew. And these factors were the kindling, so to speak, of every wickedness. So this really tells us, I just read your next question, I suppose. Once upon a time, they loved honor, glory. Now they love money and leisure. And if they don't get their money and their leisure, they're willing to kill and burn and take it. I think that's how Sallust is introducing us to Catiline. You know, what sort of city fosters a person like this? And why does he get so many people to join him? Well, because we've gotten slackers, rich, lazy, and honor is nothing. You know, I skipped over this, but you know, Plutarch told a story that Pompey at one point set up a table in his yard, for crying out loud, was paying off people for votes. Wasn't even hiding it. Wasn't even hiding it. And he just tried to marry Cato's daughter, and Cato said, no, you're not marrying Pompey. And then after this happened, he was like, see, I told you, because this was kind of disgraceful, and now our family would be involved in the disgrace if you'd married him. Aren't you glad you didn't marry him? And his wife and his daughter were like, yeah, we're glad. No honor. No honor. And this takes him to the next definition. And I asked you, what does he see as the difference between ambition and avarice, greed? What's the difference?
I believe the difference would be that ambition is looking for the good, like looking for the good of your people, and avarice is looking for the good of yourself.
Okay. Could I be ambitious just for myself, though?
Yes, and then that's where I think there comes like, in modern times, ambition has gotten a bad, well, like, a good and bad rap.
Ambition and can turn into greed easily. See Pompey. He was a very ambitious person, but that ambition turned into, oh, I need to kind of like figure everything out. Let's fight up Julius Caesar. Like, that's a bad idea to do that. But anyway, like,
It's a bad idea.
ambition, they kind of cross over a little bit. It's what the ambition is about.
Okay.
So if your ambition is convoluted, it's going to turn into greed easily. If your ambition is for Rome and for your people, then that's different than going for wealth and money. The Roman virtue, the Roman ambition was protecting Rome, fighting in Rome, and the plebs and the patricians. That was back in the day. And then we're going to this time where our ambition is turning into wealth, money, greed, lust, things like that. It's just a convolution of.
And I think Sallust is exactly talking about Ethan's first form of ambition. There's something good in it when it's on behalf of others. Here's how he phrases it. Okay, this is on page 9. At first, people's minds were taxed less by avarice than by ambition, which, though a fault, was nevertheless closer to prowess. His ambition and avarice, neither of them super good, but ambition is a step above, it's closer to that prowess. For the good man and the base man have a similar personal craving for glory, honor, and command. But the former, the good man, strives along a true path, whereas the latter, the bad man, because he lacks good qualities, presses forward by cunning and falsity. Avarice involves an enthusiasm for money, which no wise man has ever desired. As if saturated with a harmful poison, it feminizes the manly body and mind, knows neither limit nor surfeit. Greedy people are never satisfied. And you have to be really stupid to think you will be satisfied with money, according to Sallust. Look around. Look at the wealthiest people you can find and see how happy they are. It's not going to make you happy. But he said ambition, on the other hand, it's kind of got a lofty goal. Greed has no lofty goal whatsoever. So he says, no, they're both false. But if you got to have one, at least the ambition are shooting for honor, glory, things that have a ring about them of goodness. Money never has a ring about it of goodness to anybody except at Crassus. Yes.
The way he had talked about ambition that separates it from good ambition and bad ambition is not only the end result, but how you get there.
Yes, yes. But at least, and so even the bad ambition person, the bad ambitious person is shooting for something that's a good, honor and glory. They're just doing it in the wrong way. But they're still shooting for something good. The greedy person shooting for just trash. I mean, really, honestly, you're not going to take it with you. Yes.
I could also add that it's the quality, how you go about it. Like, what do you do? Like, how are you getting that ambition? How are you greed and avarice? Is that how you spell that?
Varice, like avarice.
It's a weird word, but it's very interesting. I like that word. I want to use that.
Avarus, Latin, yes.
What?
It's avarus, A-V-A-R-U-S.
So it's just like, what's the motive behind it? Some people, I wanna be a consul of Rome. I love Rome. That's ambition.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I want to take everybody's money. I'm Crassus.
Yes. No, and we saw, even though Crassus had a lot of power, he might have been ambitious and had glory. The greed undercut everything. Everybody had this opinion of Crassus to where, we kill him and possibly pour molten gold on his throat. Not sure about that. So Sallust spends a lot of time. He spends almost a fourth of this book setting the stage. These are the kind of men that are in Rome. And he says, in so great and corrupt a community, this is page 11, Catiline kept himself surrounded, it was very easy to do, by hordes of those responsible for every depravity and deed, like bodyguards. He's wicked, and like a magnet, he just draws other wicked people to himself. He also draws another group on page 12. There were friends and allies on whom Catiline relied, and both because there was mighty debt across the land, and because many sullen soldiers, too lavish with their own property and mindful of the seizures of their old victory, were longing for civil war. So he conceived a scheme of an assault upon the Commonwealth. He has ne'er-do-wells who just want to do something bad, but he has another group. I remember back when I was fighting with Sulla and we just sacked city after city. I brought home boatloads of stuff, but then I threw some awesome parties and all my stuff is gone. So now I need more stuff. If only we could have another war, I could just snatch some more stuff. Plus, it's just fun. Let's go out and do it again. Remember when we sacked that city? Let's go out and relive old times. And this was who Catiline was appealing to. Destitute former soldiers and just plain bad people. I don't know how else to say it. And he gives a speech to stir them up. Sallust probably makes this speech up. I don't know how often conspirators, you could hide in a little inner room or something and have a rousing speech. But I asked you, what seems to be his problem? What's his grievance? Why in the world does he want to murder half the Senate and burn down Rome? Okay, power, yes. Who has the power that he wants? Maybe, but at this point, we have the puppet masters behind the scenes. We have just a few guys. We have Pompey, Caesar, and Crassus. Maybe a few other prominent senators. He says this.
Sulla?
That-
Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar.
Yeah. Did I say Sulla?
No.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I thought it was Sulla. It says it, can I read it from the Cicero part?
Yes.
Thank you. These having for their leader, Mylius?
Milius.
Okay. Who had served with distinction in the wars against Sulla, joined themselves to Catiline and came to Rome to assist him with their suffrages at the election. For he again pretended to the consulship, having resolved to kill Cicero in a tumult at the elections.
Yes. So yes. So Plutarch chimes in on that. Former soldier of Sulla. So this is what Catiline says to them. He's talking to his fellow conspirators. Ever since the Commonwealth passed to the jurisdiction of a powerful few, it has always been to them that the dues of kings and tetrarchs go, that the taxes of the peoples and nations are paid. The rest of us, all the committed and good, noble and ignoble, have been simply the masses, denied favor, denied influence. Hence, all power, favor, honor, and riches rest with them, or are where they want them. To us, they have left the dangers, rejections, lawsuits, and destitution. Is it not better to die with prowess and than to lose in disgrace a life which is pitiable and dishonorable, once you've become the plaything of the haughtiness of others? They get everything, we get nothing. You used to have something and you don't have it anymore. You want to get it back? I got a plan. It's really not a very subtle argument. Like, they have it, we want it, we will kill them and take it. Yes.
I just want to point out that Sulla's soldiers, the man who wanted all of this money and was willing to do anything to get it, the type of soldiers that he led and that maybe he even influenced. Because if you're living, if you're following in a battalion of this guy, and you're living with this guy who leads you into go take whatever you want. The only thing that matters is money. If that is your mindset for the last 5 to 10 years in this campaign, these are the type of people that Sulla is making. They could have been valiant warriors, but instead now they're mercenaries looking for more money to blow on parties.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
We even heard Plutarch say that Sulla would lavishly spend on his own soldiers just to lure other people's soldiers away from them to him, because they thought, well, Sulla's guys get everything. This is the monster. Yes, this is the monster he created. And they flocked to Catiline. So it turns out that one of the conspirators has a girlfriend. And this guy tells his girlfriend about it. And the girlfriend tells Cicero. Yeah. But Cicero's problem is he doesn't really have hard evidence, that can stand up in court. Like, somebody's girlfriend is not really good evidence. It's he said, she said. It's one person's word against another one's. So Cicero needs to watch and wait. He can't act too soon. He's got to wait till there's no question about it. In the meantime, it's sort of one of those situations, I think, where I know, and I think you know, but do you know that I know that you know? Each side is like, what does Cicero know? What does he not know? And it says they decided a little later that night with armed men, they would all call on Cicero as if to pay their respect and suddenly stab him. But when curious, the guy whose girlfriend was blabbing realized the great danger threatening the consul. He informed Cicero through his girlfriend. So this guy's riding the fence. He's playing both sides. And Cicero has a pipeline of information. Like, tell me what you hear. I'm still waiting. I can't act yet because they haven't really done anything yet. It says he took it to the Senate. And the Senate decreed, we saw this in Livy sometimes, that they should do their utmost to prevent the Commonwealth from suffering any damage. This is code for consuls, you have all power. Do it. Do it, whatever you need to do to keep us safe. That's an extreme. It says they can prepare an army, wage war, coerce allies and citizens by any means, wield the highest command and jurisdiction at home and on campaign. They aren't normally able to do that. When the Senate says, save us from trouble, they can now mobilize armies. Oh, I'm sorry, page 20. 20. It was kind of in the first full paragraph of page 20 where it said that. So they know Catiline is up to no good. They mobilize armies because they've got conspirators out in Italy in the countryside. Catiline and a couple, Cethegus and Lentulus, his right hand, can you have two right hand men? Are there in the city with him. And he comes before the Senate. It says Marcus Tullius, that's Cicero, as consul, whether fearful of the man's presence or affected by anger, delivered a sparkling speech of benefit to the Commonwealth, of which he afterwards issued the written version. Okay, give me a moment, because I got to find this in Plutarch. He summoned Catiline to the Senate and questioned him as to the charges made against him. Catiline, believing there were many in the Senate desirous of change and to give a specimen of himself to the conspirators present, returned an audacious answer. What harm, said he, when I see two bodies, the one lean and consumptive with a head, that's the Senate, the other great and strong without one, that's the common people, if I put a head to the body that wants one? This covert representation of the Senate and the people excited yet greater apprehensions in Cicero. I'm sorry, that is my phone. Unbelievable. Oh, it's my father-in-law who has a habit of accidentally dialing me when he doesn't mean to. So it says, I'm trying to find the spot, and I can't find it. It says in Plutarch that everybody in the Senate moved away from him. Moved away from Catiline. Oh shoot, I can't find it. Anyway, it says they warned everybody of the great slaughter intended by Catiline and advised them to leave the city. And so anyway, the reason I'm trying to find that is because of this famous picture that I brought. This is called, and this is all the Wheelocks, leave Catiline and take your dirty, rotten scoundrels with you. It says something like that in Latin. This is called Cicero denouncing Catiline in the Senate. This is Catiline. And Cicero is haranguing him. And the senators are moving. Like everybody, I don't want to sit next to Catiline anymore. Plutarch says he even revealed a weapon, like sort of the, in the Old West, where they got the, tap their overcoat behind and they've got the gun, the pistol there.
Who, Cicero did?
No,
The pistol.
Catiline.
Okay.
Catiline. So this picture pops up again and again, various forms. But yes, he's down there. It's like, oh, I'm toast. And Cicero's letting him have it over here. So Catiline takes his advice and he leaves the city. But he leaves his lackeys, Lentulus and Cethegus, in the town and tells them, he gives them instructions. And interestingly, Sallust tells us that he recruits a lot of the common people of Rome are on his side, on Catiline's side. And listen to what he's planning. It says, page 22, on kind of in the middle. It says to prepare slaughter and fire and other deeds of war, and he would advance on the city any day with a large army. And Sallust asks, why so many people thought this was okay. And this was the first question I asked you on page 39. Why does he think so many people supported Catiline?
Because he's desiring change.
Okay. You know, if I'm down on my luck, any change seems good, frankly. Do you know what I mean? Anything we can do to stir it up. Maybe when everything gets reshuffled, when the property gets reshuffled and the power gets reshuffled, maybe my hand will be better. It's just like calling a re-deal. Like, can't you do that when you play certain card games? Like, I want to deal again, like gather up the cards and deal again. Can you ever do that?
Yeah, there's mixed gifts.
Okay. Play cards very much. It's like that. I've been dealt a bad hand. Shuffle them again. Maybe my hand will be better. I'll take my chances. And so he says this on page 24, bottom of page 24. Such was the violence of the disease and the kind of rottenness which had attacked many of the citizens' spirits. And not only was there the mental derangement of those who were accessories to the conspiracy, but the entire plebs, in its enthusiasm for revolution, approved completely of Catiline's projects. Now, we don't know how they knew how extensive they were, but it says, it is always those in a community who have no resources, who resent the good and extol the wicked, who hate what is old and crave what is new, who in their hatred of their own circumstances are enthusiastic for everything to be changed, and who thrive on disruption and sedition with no concern, since destitution is a possession easily held without loss. If I don't have anything, can't really lose anything. Can't lose destitution. Can't lose poverty. And he goes on page 25. First of all, there flowed into Rome as if into a bilge those whose disreputableness and discontent were transcendent. Others having lost their patrimony. Others driven from home by depravity. Many were mindful of the sullen victories. Generous public and private grants had made them prefer city leisure to thankless toil. Love it when they pass out free food. Love that. Do that again. Do that some more. Maybe if we mix things up, you'll do that some more. I'm going to move on. The conspirators that Catiline left in the city met up with some guys who were visiting ambassadors from a Gaulish tribe, the Allobroges. They were there, and the conspirators came and said, let's have a talk. You know, are you happy with the way things are going in Gaul? Is it pretty good? Because, you know, if it's not, you might want to hear about a little plan we've got. We're going to mix it up a little bit, and, you know, maybe things will go better for you guys. Maybe you guys would like to join us. And they said, well, can you write a letter to our leaders back home and we can take the letter back? Oh, sure. We'll put it all in writing. Let's write down the whole conspiracy, and you take that with you. Also, here's a letter for Catiline. Can you give that to him? Because he's, you know, when you travel up Italy back to Gaul, they've got it all in writing. And they look at each other and say, well, we could join him, but I don't think this is going to go well. Let's go see Cicero. And they bring him all the letters. They bring him everything. He's got it in writing. It's done. It's over.
This is going to be a heck of a court case.
It is. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the fact is that there is no court case at all, which causes some problems later. So they arrest them, and the Senate meets. This is after another assassination attempt on Cicero. They go just camp outside his door, and Cicero knows, and he just doesn't open the door. And let me find the right page. Okay, on page 33. It says they put a motion before the Senate as to what its decision was concerning those who had been handed over into custody. What do we do with these guys? They have been caught red-handed. Here is their writing. Here is their signature. We know everything they're planning. And one senator, Solanus, stands up and it says, declared that reprisal should be exacted from those who were being held in custody. This is code for execute them. Execute them. We ran into this towards the end of Livy, too, an episode where they decided to put someone to death without proper trial. And it said some of the citizens were uneasy. It's happening again. This is several hundred years later. And of all people, Julius Caesar stands up. And he doesn't want to execute them. And I asked you, what are his reasons? Why does he say this? He goes on for some pages, but there's a few main reasons. Did anybody catch one of them? Why does Julius Caesar say don't execute? Okay. Yes. Yes. He does mention the Macedonian War. Let me give you some. I'm starting on page 33 on the bottom of. Well, actually, I'm going to start on page 34. Okay, kind of in the middle. He brought up the Macedonian War, the Punic Wars, and he said, "How have we always behaved towards enemies? Our forefathers asked what was worthy of themselves rather than what could be done with justice to an enemy. Before we punished in the past, in these former wars, we said, what redounds to our own honor? Not what can we get away with to this dirty, rotten scoundrel that did something bad." He says, you need to do not pay more heed to your anger than to your reputation. I think, conscript fathers, that no torture matches the deeds of these men, but many mortals remember only what comes last. And in the case of heinous individuals, they forget the crime and talk only of their punishment if it was a little too severe. Now, Solanus wants to execute them. His opinion seems to me not cruel, but foreign to this commonwealth of ours. We don't do this sort of thing. You know, when you have a sensational court case, everybody's going to remember the punishment long after they remember the case. They're going to start talking about you and stop talking about Catiline. If we just go executing people with no trial. Yes?
Yeah, also, I may have interpreted it wrong, but on page 34, paragraph 9, or 9 to 15, he's just talking about, hey, how about we just don't kill them? Because, killing is a terrible thing. We gotta lessen that, take that out of.
Yes, yes.
That's the guy.
Well, yes, but also extended a lot of forgiveness to his enemies. So we'll hold our assessment of Julius Caesar till we read his life. But he says, you know what? Death seems to me like the release from affliction. Like, if you think death is releasing them from all of the afflictions of life, we shouldn't do that anyway. But he said, who do you think? Oh, let me find it. Oh, it may be said, who will criticize a decree against parricides of the Commonwealth? Time is the answer. How's the future going to look at you? Sometime when they're not scared that the city's going to burn down and the Senate's going to be destroyed. They're reading it in a history book now. They're like, those dirty rotters, they executed them without a trial. Caesar says, that's what they're going to say about you. Cato then gets up. Now, I don't think Sallust really tells us this. I don't think Plutarch's Cicero does either. Cato heavily insinuates Julius Caesar is in on the plot. He thinks he's in with Catiline, and that's why he doesn't want to execute them. And he says as much. Julius Caesar is often under this kind of suspicion. But he says, when a city has been captured, the defeated have nothing left. And for time constraints, I'm going to zip on. But he says, do you still hesitate and doubt what to do with enemies caught inside your walls? They agreed with Cato. And Cicero brought them out one at a time and executed them. And then the rest of the conspiracy really just faded away. Catiline was outside the city with an army, but after he found out that his conspirators, the whole thing was blown wide open. They fought, pitched battle. Catiline's forces lose. And it says he ends with this. As for the many who emerged from the camp for the purposes of viewing or plundering and were turning over the enemy corpses, some discovered a friend, others a guest or relative. Likewise, there were those who recognized their own personal antagonists. Thus, throughout the entire army, delight, sorrow, grief, and joy were variously experienced. This is what happens when there is civil war. You go out on the battlefield and you turn over a body, and it's your brother, or your cousin, or your neighbor. No one wins. Catiline certainly didn't win. And so now I'm going to pop back to Cicero's life. And here's the next question. What habit made Cicero tiresome to people? And what did he like to talk about? Something we just talked about. It says on our Plutarch, page 424, he created himself much envy and offended many, not by evil actions, but because he was always lauding and magnifying himself. For neither the Senate, nor assembly of the people, nor court of judicature could meet, in which he was not heard to talk of Catiline and Lentulus. Indeed, he also filled his books and writings with his own praises, to such an excess as to render a style in itself most pleasant and delightful, nauseous and irksome to his hearers. This ungrateful humor, like a disease, always clinging to him. He says over and over. Remember, I did that. I saved Rome. Don't forget. Yes. Arrogance, exactly. Because we just have to make sure people know how good I am. It's the old Cicero who came home from Sicily, isn't it, and said, "What's everybody saying?" Nothing. Well, this time he did something big. I saved your behinds, all of you, and you'd better be grateful to me forever. Yeah, and they are. He mentions it a lot. I haven't read tons of Cicero, but he does bring it up an exceeding amount, as does Wheelock's Latin, right, Lauren? He mentions a lot, on the day when I saved her. So that's how he made himself irksome. How did he downright make enemies? He had a habit. He did something a lot. Plutarch says on page 424, the way in which sometimes to make his orations more striking, he neglected decorum and dignity. In other words, snarky jokes at people's expense. Because he was very witty, apparently. You ever have somebody say something and later you think of the perfect thing you could have said back to them, but you don't think of it at the time. Yeah. And then it's too late. Cicero thought of it at the time. So starting on page 425, we have a list of these. I will read a few. At one time, Crassus had said that no one in his family ever lived beyond 60 years of age. And then afterwards, he denied it and asked, what should have put that in my head to say so? It was to gain the people's favor, answered Cicero. You knew how glad they'd be to hear it, because he was getting close to 60. To a young man who was suspected of having given a poisoned cake to his father, and who talked largely of the invectives he meant to deliver against Cicero, better these, he said, than your cakes. To Metellus Nepos, who in a dispute between them repeated several times, "Who was your father, Cicero?" He replied, "Your mother has made the answer to such a question in your case more difficult." Nepos' mother having been of ill repute.
The original your mom joke.
Yes. There was one, a guy they didn't know. Oh, one of Crassus's sons, who was thought so exceedingly like a man of the name of Axius as to throw some suspicion on his mother's honor, made a successful speech in the Senate. Cicero, on being asked how he liked it, replied with the Greek words axios crassu. Axios means worthy. Literally, that means worthy of Crassus, but it also hints that Axios is his dad. It's a pun on so he just publicly, yeah, worthy of Axios. The conspiracy comes back to bite Cicero, and here's how. I will paraphrase the story. There's a guy named Claudius, and Claudius is in love with Julius Caesar's wife. And so it's time to have some sort of religious festival at Julius Caesar's house in which only women are allowed to be present. Okay? And, but Claudius thinks it would be just a great lark to dress up like a woman and sneak in and sort of waylay Julius Caesar's wife. It is unclear how she feels about any of this. But, so he sneaks in with the help of a servant. But he loses his way in the house, and some servant who isn't in on it asks him who he is, but it's just like a girl. But when he answers, he's obviously not a girl. And she starts screaming that there's a man in the house. You've got to stop the whole religious festival if it's been contaminated by a man, you know. And so Claudius gets I don't know if Claudius flees, anyway, but they know it's him. And they bring him to trial because it's sacrilege. It's against the law to violate this. And his whole defense rests on the fact that he claims he wasn't in Rome. I wasn't even here. It wasn't me. I wasn't even here. And Cicero got up to testify that Claudius came to his house that very morning. So Claudius is heavily fined, and now he hates Cicero. Cicero blew up his defense. He's the most embarrassed man on the planet. Julius Caesar divorced his wife. And he said, I don't think she did anything wrong. They're like, well, why did you divorce her? And he said, well, I can't have any whiff of anything not virtuous in my household, just in case. I'm sure the life of Caesar, Plutarch's Life of Caesar, will repeat this story. The important thing for Cicero here, though, is Claudius gets elected tribune, and he makes it his life's, his career goal to bring down Cicero. So he decides to press charges because Cicero put those guys to death without trial. And it was illegal. It's like, I'm taking him to court. I am bringing him down. And it was true. You see the problem. Everybody knows he put them to death, technically illegally. Many people were on board with it, but nonetheless, it wasn't correctly done. So Cicero leaves. He leaves Rome. They pass a sentence of exile in his absence, but he's already gone. He's gone for 16 months. And until things settle down somewhat. I asked you, actually, no, we'll talk about that. I asked you what danger Plutarch sees in engaging in public life. Did anybody find what I was looking for? It's on page 430. It says Cicero in his exile desired his friends not to call him orator, but philosopher. This is in the middle. Because he had made philosophy his business and had only used rhetoric as an instrument for attaining his objects in public life. But the desire of glory has great power in washing the tinctures of philosophy out of the souls of men and in imprinting the passions of the common people by custom and conversation in the minds of those that take part in governing them. You may be the greatest, wisest philosopher ever, but the moment you hold public office and you have to constantly listen to the complaints and the desires of all the people, it washes it out of you. It washes philosophy out of you. And you get caught up in the mob mentality instead of being outside of it. Anyway, Cicero is in exile and he has some time to reflect on things like this. Do I really want to have honor and glory and be famous? Maybe I just want to retreat from public life and be a philosopher. He wrote a bunch of books, while he was in exile, but he came back eventually. Claudius was brought down, Cicero came back, and then he faces a choice, another choice, Pompey or Caesar. Who do I cast my vote for? Don't really like either one of them. Plutarch says he's giving advice to both, writing letters to Caesar, personally entreating Pompey. He says on page 433, I know whom I should fly, not whom I should fly to. I know who to run away from, both of them, but I don't know who to run to. I got to pick a side. He picked Pompey. When Pompey left the city, when Julius Caesar was marching down Italy, Cicero went with him, as did the whole Senate. And we know how that ended. It ended with Pompey dead on the shore of Egypt, and Julius Caesar, the last man standing. And as the supporters of Pompey started to trickle back into Italy, including Cicero, Caesar forgave them all. Caesar, as soon as he saw Cicero coming, a good way before the rest of the company, came down to meet him, saluted him, and leading the way, conversed with him alone for some furlongs. And Cicero, just like that, has forgotten that he wasn't going to be in public life anymore. Remember how he was going to be a philosopher? No, but there's honor and glory now and praise. I'm back in. As far as we know, he had no part in murdering Julius Caesar. As a matter of fact, some of you have read the play Julius Caesar, the Shakespeare play with me, and you might remember the scene in the Shakespeare play where they said, should we invite Cicero in? And Brutus says, nah, don't invite him. He never likes anything unless he plans it himself. Don't ask him. And so apparently he was just as shocked as anyone else when a bunch of people started stabbing Julius Caesar. He did not know. Now, Julius Caesar died, and he left everything to his nephew Octavian. And his nephew Octavian came to town, and Cicero says that he had had a dream long ago, and he'd seen the face of a young man that was going to rescue Rome. But he didn't know who this young man was. And then he saw Octavian walking around in Rome. He's like, who's that? And they told him, that's the man. So Cicero took this guy under his wing. Plutarch says, Cicero let himself be carried away and deceived, though an old man, by the persuasion of a boy. Loved him. For the young man, once established and possessed of the office of consul, bade Cicero farewell, and reconciling himself to Antony and Lepidus, joined his power with theirs, and divided the government like a piece of property between them. And you guys probably remember this scene too if you read the Shakespeare play with me. These three men, Octavian, who we will now call Augustus, because later he takes the nickname of Augustus, which just means the revered one, the honored one, and Mark Antony, and Lepidus, who's the third one that nobody ever cares about, like poor Crassus in the first triumvirate. They just divided up Rome, they divided up power, and they all made agreements about who needed to die. Augustus said, Brutus and Cassius need to die. They killed Uncle Julius. We got to take them out. Okay. Lepidus had an uncle, and they said, well, Lepidus, you need to give up your uncle. Okay, we'll kill my uncle. Mark Antony, who do you want? I want Cicero. I want him dead. Like, really? Non-negotiable. Cicero, dead. Cicero had written a series of speeches against Mark Antony. He never actually delivered them. Apparently, he just published them. It was like a movie going straight to video, straight to publishing. No actual delivery. And they're nasty. I mean, they're really good, but he's a dirty, rotten lecher, sex addict, fiend, and a drunk. And I mean, he just loser in every way, Mark Antony. And he published these. And Mark Antony said, oh, Cicero is dead. I want him gone. And the other two said, okay, we'll agree. Well, Cicero can be on the list. Yes.
So we have those accounts when we have that.
The Philippics. Yes. They're called Philippics. There's an Athenian speaker named Demosthenes, and he was a great speaker, and he gave a series of speeches against Philip of Macedon, Alexander the Great's dad, and they're called Philippics. And then now they call Philippics any speech against somebody, but Cicero called them Philippics because he was intimating like he's Demosthenes against Philip of Macedon. I think there's some, you know what, you can Google them if you like in your free time. If you Google Cicero first Philippic or something like that, they're kind of long, but they're get you a feel for why this man wanted Cicero dead so much. So Cicero, once again, does not know what to do. Inexplicably, I will never understand this. He knows that Mark Antony is after him. And it says, oh, I didn't really highlight it. As I'll paraphrase it. He goes to the coast and gets in a boat to leave. I mean, I don't know how far Mark Antony would have hunted him down. Run away and lay low for a little while. Gets in the boat and like the wind is unfavorable. He ends up back on the coast of Italy. He has a villa there. And he goes to his villa. He sends his brother Quintus to go to his brother's home to get supplies, for their exile, whatever, for their run. And Quintus and Cicero's nephew get waylaid and murdered because they're related to Cicero. And I don't know at what point Cicero finds out about this. He goes and takes a nap. And then his servants say, you've got to run for it. You've got to get up and run for it. So they put him in a litter, one of those things that people carry. That's not a very specific description at all. A sofa, a big sedan chair or something that people carry you. Because he's kind of old at this point. He's not very fast. And they're going through the woods towards the coast, and he hears the pursuers. He can hear them chasing them in the woods. And he says, put me down. I'm not getting away. Put me down. And it said he just offered his neck. It's like, it's done. Not bad. Just kill me. Maybe he was weary of trying to pick the right side. I don't know. Mark Antony took his head and his hands and nailed them up on the rostrum, the platform at the end of the forum where people made public speeches, where they did exhibit things like this, because he wanted the head that thought of it and the hands that wrote those nasty speeches about me. And of course, most of us know that Mark Antony also ends up coming to a bad end. Lepidus just sort of faded away.
Yeah, we don't know what happened to that guy.
No, I think he gets into Africa. I don't know if he died there, or nobody remembers Lepidus. He's so unmemorable. But Plutarch ends with this great story. Some long time after, Augustus Caesar, I have been told, visiting one of his daughter's sons, found him with a book of Cicero's in his hand. The boy, for fear, endeavored to hide it under his gown, while Caesar, perceiving, took it from him, and turning over a great part of the book, standing, gave it him again, and said, "My child, this was a learned man, and a lover of his country."
He was also a jerk.
Well, or just indecisive. But indecisive because he wanted to see maybe what side the glory lay on thickest.
You see a lot of Romans and Greeks dying for their pursuit of glory. And in the end, you gotta wonder, is it worth it? I'm sure we know about it, but is it worth it?
And do we learn anything from these stories? Do we have people today who would give anything for personal glory? You bet. In our country and in other countries, this is paramount to them. And they just don't ever get the memo from history that there are a few times when it goes well, that someone is revered and honored in perpetuity, but often it goes south. Today we revere Cicero. Heck, even Augustus was revering him in front of his grandson and saying, don't be ashamed to read that. I know, I was on the team that had him killed. I get that. He was a good man. He loved his country. Great writer. But at the time, it ended his life, this desire for glory. Yes, Ethan?
What we do learn is that paganism ruins nations. That's basically paganism, atheism, all of that ruins nations completely.
Would you say a lack of virtue?
Not a lack of virtue, a lack of wisdom and knowledge of the Lord. That's what the pattern is. Because they're seeking after greed and money. They're seeking after power. Those are things that as Christians we're humbling ourselves to the Lord. Therefore, it doesn't matter if we have power or not.
Well, we can look at, let's say, the Muslim Empire, or the early Muslim Empire. They were extremely successful, and they were extremely wise without ever knowing the Lord. So that's why I said instead virtue instead of Christianity.
And
are they successful now?
They're getting there again. But the other problem, Ethan, and I don't dispute what you said at all, but even Christian nations have failed to use the wisdom, Anyway, please read The Life of Julius Caesar. We will talk about that after Thanksgiving. And then we have another week, maybe two, if I invite you to my house, after Thanksgiving break. And we have one more history book to read after this. Tacitus's Annals. Tacitus writes about Augustus and Tiberius and Caligula and Nero. And it's the stuff that you think of, those early Roman emperors, and it's fun. And then after Christmas break, we'll finish up Tacitus, and then we're going to launch into something completely different. We're going to be letters from the church fathers, and it's just Augustine's Confessions, and it's going to just be kind of a switch of gears. So hang on, one more history book, and you got it. All right, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, guys. Bye-bye.